All right. Good morning, guys. Thank you so much for coming here. Um, I flew 18 hours flight from the nice weather in Bali, my home, to be here for this session, um, for the parties as well in Berlin, of course. But that's conversation for the break time, right? Yeah, so I really appreciate you being here today. And we're going to talk a lot about education. That's the field of work that I am in right now. And probably I'm going to start first with sharing a bit of a personal story. Having been educated almost entirely in Indonesia's education system. Um, the TLDR is I don't think that I remember much of what I learned in school. Um, for the most part, I love school for the friendships, and uh, yeah, I can't really think of anything else. Uh, but one thing that I know for sure is I think the school system in Indonesia has failed in honing the love of learning for me. And I don't think that I'm alone here, because Indonesia has been long plagued by learning crisis, with 70% of 15-year-old students actually performing below minimum competency levels in literacy and numeracy. And if we want to fix this problem, it's not an easy feat, because we also have a scale issue or opportunity, however you want to call it. Indonesia is a huge nation, for those of you who don't know. There are more than 250 million people living in Indonesia, which roughly translates to around 60 million students, 4 million teachers, and more than 400,000 schools spanning across vast region, which if you drive, it's probably the same from the distance between Lisbon to Tehran. But we really have to start somewhere, right? So in 2019, luckily, the government of Indonesia, through its Ministry of Education and Culture, embarked in this ambitious transformation agenda called the Emancipated Learning. Actually, I'm not so sure if this makes sense in English, but I promise you this sounds way cooler in Indonesian. Because the word emancipated in Indonesia, we call it merdeka, and it has such a poignant, romantic meaning, because we use that term a lot as an expression of our rallying cry for independence back in 1945 when we first established ourselves as a nation. So, yeah, semantics aside, the goal of the emancipated learning vision is essentially like what I mentioned earlier. It's to envision school system to enable love of learning for the students. And over the past couple of years, the ministry have done quite a lot of reforms to make this vision a reality. Of course, we changed the curriculum. We always change the curriculum, right? But this time, we make it much, much simpler, actually. And we provide greater agencies, not only to schools, but also for students to learn according to their own pace. We also spend significant amount of investment in increasing the quality of our teachers, but also the mindset. We spend so much more focus on providing practical experiences, project-based learnings, and this is where it gets quite interesting, at least for me. From the get-go, the ministry have decided to take on a bet, to use technology as a way to accelerate and scale the impact of the progress. And this is where we come in. So GovTech Edu was established in 2020 as the thinking and development partner for the Ministry of Education, where we collaborate together trying to solve, often miserably, some of the most complex challenges in Indonesia's education system in order for us to realize that emancipated learning vision. We're a pretty big organization now, and how we work is like what I mentioned earlier, like we work really based on collaboration, so it's not a vendor model, so to say. And one thing that is consistent throughout the 4 years of us building so many different products and services is that we never try to replace or to digitize teaching or digitize classroom experiences. Because one of the core principles that we have is, or one of the core belief is that the most effective technology platform should actually unleash the human potential in society instead of replacing them. In our context, it's about increasing the effectiveness of our educators instead of replacing them, right? We do this through several means. Some are sexier than others. I'm going to start with the less sexy part first. We believe that technology can actually improve the operational efficiencies of educators. So in Indonesia, many of the teachers and school principals are actually the school administrators as well. So they have to deal with a lot of administrative tasks. They have to deal with the school finances, accounting, even all the way to procurement. And we believe that if we can use technology to simplify these processes and reduce significantly the hours that our educators have to put in doing this administrative task, right? We can actually encourage them to spend more time for things that matters. So they can spend more time with their students, right? And when they can spend more time with their students, we also believe that technology can actually help driving effectiveness so that they can better improve the quality of delivery in their teaching. We do this through several means as well, ranging from creating a nationwide dashboard that can be accessed by every school in the country, providing every school with granular level indicators that sort of like show their school environment and some of the school metrics in the hope of they can make a more data-driven decision. But we also build some products that is aimed at improving the competencies of our educators, enabling them to build community of practice, and this is where the majority of my reflection today will focus on. Because if we share like all the products that we built, I don't think that it's enough in 30 minutes, so I kind of want to just focus on one product, and it's the product that we built for our teachers. One thing that we realized over the past 4 years is that the work is so frustrating. It's so challenging, but one thing that keeps us going is we realize that design-driven mindset actually really helps us in navigating this journey. How so? So maybe a bit of prelude first. One thing that we often see is public sector innovation is often reversible. So a promising initiative can be easily overturned by change in government priorities, budget cuts, shifts in political climates. And we are very well aware that we're here because of the current administration that is very forward in thinking about innovation. But we're not going to be here forever. So from the get-go, we always need to think about, let me try to say it for a second, irreversibility of our initiatives. This means that we should always be cognizant in prioritizing projects, not only for the short-term output, but also for the long-term impact. And we need to focus on building a foundation for change that will always continue whether we're still here or not, that can outlast an administration, so to say. I know this sounds a little bit philosophical. I even have to recite pronouncing this. So I'm gonna share maybe like a bit more practical examples on how we bring this irreversibility principles to life. So when we strip it down to its first principles, how do you build a lasting product? If we reflect on our own experience, the technology products that we have a close relationship with, those are the products that has become indispensable to us. We use it because it truly adds values to our lives, and It's just a product that we truly love. And I know that it's easier said than done, but this is something that we really try to push. How do you build products? Because most government products, you kind of like force citizens to use it, right? But we know that then it's not going to outlast an administration, so how do we build products that truly add value to our users? It's not a linear journey, and we learned this pretty much the hard way as well. So the platform for teachers that I mentioned to you earlier, we actually first built it as a recipe book, as a cookbook, that really provides high quality, highly curated teaching toolkits. And we hope that teachers can just copy it. They don't really have to think much about it, apply it in the classroom, and then students will automatically get gold standard teaching delivery, right? But we're wrong. We already built the product, and during the beta launch of the product, we realized that, yeah, for most of the teachers, they can see the value, then they understand the quality of the toolkits, but for them, they might what they say is like, but I don't have what it takes to deliver this toolkits. I don't know how to do it, or it's great, but it's not relevant to what my student needs in the class. And to make matters worse, like if a teacher really wants to upskill themselves, there are more immediate challenges that they are facing, such as the administrative hurdles that I mentioned earlier, or lack of professional recognition that really precedes the need for upskilling, so to say. So reflecting on this, one thing that we realize is that then it might not make sense for us to just try to understand the needs and the pain points of our teachers, because we might get closer to product market fit if we address the immediate needs, but it might not take us closer to the vision that we want to achieve. So because of this, we try to add an extra texture to the research that we are doing, and not trying to understand only the needs and pain points and all sorts, but really try to understand some behaviors or do some observation that can uncover opportunities, that can nudge our teachers to adopt a desired behavior that we want, so to say. How does this look like? First is we actually focus a lot on trying to understand workarounds. I'm sorry if this is too small, the font, by the way. But yeah, we focus on trying to understand workarounds. These are the hacky ways to do stuff. It's the hacky ways to do stuff, and in Indonesia, nothing ever comes easy. So that's why the people are so used to being hacky with stuff. And when we try to understand the workarounds, what we realize is the teachers in Indonesia, they actually want to learn. They actually want to upskill themselves. It's just not in the way that we envision it to be. The most effective way for teachers to learn is actually through each other, with each other. They build communities of practice. They learn with peers, whether in their school or in their communities. And packed with these insights, we actually pivoted our product entirely from building from like a repository of prescriptive materials to a platform where teachers can collaborate with each other. We also focus our research a lot in terms of semantics and mindset in using more positive tones. So especially in service design, I kind of feel, to be really honest, like sometimes we focus so much on understanding pain points, understanding user frictions, understanding problems, and it brings sort of like I don't know, like a bit of a negative mindset to when we start research. But we try to switch it and try to think about, okay, why don't we focus more on opportunities? Why don't we focus more on inspiration? And when we have this mindset, we go to the field and we realize that there are actually countless of best practices out there. that is made by teachers themselves. And these best practices might not fit our idea of pedagogical standard of excellence, but it speaks more relevantly to the reality on the ground. So with this, we decided, okay, then our new product direction will be a platform for collaboration packed with best practices that is made by teachers themselves. But then one thing that we realize is GovTech is here, GovTech Edu, we only have tech talents. We worked before in like technology companies, but in order to realize this product direction, it's not enough just to roll out features. It's actually about building an ecosystem, right? Of contribution, of collaboration. And this is where service design mindset actually helps as well. Because as you experience in your professional work, of course, when we look at service design, we're not only obsessing over the front-facing experience, right? But we are also looking at other processes at play that can amplify those experiences. It could be background, internal processes, side stream processes, and whatnot. And by having this perspective, we are able to find the most effective lever for impact that might as well extend beyond technology. I'm going to give an example on how we do this, specific on trying to push for early adoption and engagement of our platform. Because like what I mentioned earlier, we can't force users to use this platform. It has to be organic. So there are some things that we did. One is to drive stronger sense of relevancy and urgency. We actually communicate to our teachers, if you remember the new curriculum that I mentioned earlier, that the most effective way to learn about the new curriculum is through the platform, because then you can get implementation guidelines that is reliable. You can get best practices from other teachers as well on how they implement the new curriculum, and this sort of like built a stronger sense of relevance and urgency to the users. But then we also have to think about how about the supply? Where do we get these best practices from? So what we did is we connect with the teachers from the Master Teacher Program. So this is a bespoke ministry program that is aimed at equipping cohorts of teachers, tens of thousands of them to be exact, with instructional leadership skills, with students' centeredness orientation, so they can be fast-tracked in their career as school leaders. So these are like already teachers who are being trained to be the best teachers in public schools in Indonesia. We connect with them, and of course, they become a great source of supply of best practices for us. And as a bonus, they also become a motor to encourage adoption with their own network as well. We all do look at the demand, the initial demand, the supply, but there's also about retention, right? Like how do we drive continuous engagement? This is something that we've been doing over the past year. We focus on trying to we're building a mechanism that tries to tie teacher and contribution and activity in the platform with opportunities, with professional opportunities. So the more active you are, we can sort of like identify the right talents and we give them the right opportunities for them. So it's really tying it down with advancement opportunities. Does it work? I hope that we're on the right track. So after we pivot to the new direction, we actually managed to get to our first 1 million user in 7 months. Thank you. And thank you. It's the work of a village. And to date, around 20 months after the release, we have touched, or like the platform has been trialed by 3 million teachers. That's roughly around 70% of teachers in Indonesia, and many of them are actually active users. These are just users at the end of the day. What's really encouraging for me is actually the level of contribution. There are more than 580,000 best practices to date, contributed by teachers themselves, around 150,000 teachers, along with thousands of teaching toolkits, self-paced training modules. And what's crazy for me is I didn't even know that there are 26,000 communities of learners in Indonesia that's already in the platform, sharing their activities, sharing their webinars, for example. And this progress really gives us sort of like an affirmation that we're probably on the right track. It's still very much early in the process of the entire transformation, but we're on the right track, hopefully. So when trimmed into a 30-minute talk, it seems like we know what we're doing, but in reality, we really don't. Like almost all of us have no experience in public sector nor education when we first started. We have issues with product market fit for many of our products. We learned how to deal with this ambiguous problem space, which, like it feels like we're constantly juggling things, many of which output we cannot control. And even from an organizational perspective, we grow from the first employee to almost 500 employees in less than 4 years. Majority of the time is spent during COVID. But there are some reflection that make me think about, okay, why are we still here then? The first one is truly about the collaboration with the bureaucrats. There are a lot of discussion about like how to work with bureaucrats. And from our experience, at the core of it is actually about influencing mindset over frameworks and processes. We never really glorify design workshop or like user journeys or let's use Post-its. We do that, but we never focus on that. We focus more on role modeling the right mindset. Simple things like, being gutsy is good. And if you want to have this collaboration works, then we have to have continual reflection and feedback. Or something as simple as being user-centered make decision-making easier. I'm going to give you an anecdote that exemplifies this. Early on in our journey, we have a deadlock over specific decisions when we have meeting with the high echelons in the ministry. And actually one of them said, look, folks, we're not the users here. Why don't we just prototype the product, test it to users, and get the feedback as a way to actually make the decision? And it's very surprising for us because a couple of months before that, they're not even aware of this whole concept of human-centered design or however you want to call it, right? So it's this small change in mindset that keeps us believing. But we also learn a lot from them, actually. We learn from our bureaucrats who are more used to dealing with large, complex, nationwide scale problems, irregardless whether they do something about it or not, but they're used to dealing with those stuff, right? The importance of good enough, actually. One thing that we learn is that when we're talking about building or doing a very complex problem, right? Sticking with that professional ego, like the designer idealism, right? And focusing on driving perfection at all costs is just flat out inefficient and potentially bring high cost of failure as well. We actually prefer to just hone our ability to be okay with delivering good enough products, throw it to the market and use the feedback as a way to continually iterate. And going back to the designer idealism and designer ego, one thing that we realized that sometimes our version of good enough is already very good for our users. The closing part of this talk, I want to share my own personal reflection, actually. I think one of the biggest learning that I have experienced so far is about humility. So I learned to redefine my idea of a successful outcome. Because I know that it doesn't really make sense to say that in 5 years' time, technology will transform the Indonesia's education system for the better. It's just not realistic to say that. But we're completely okay if we know that we're playing our part in building a self-sustaining, irreversible ecosystem of collaboration between education change makers. At the end of the day, I feel that we're just building the foundation, right? We're just paving ways here for future education change makers out there to continue our legacy, to continue this transformation. So that's very much like the main learning or the main reflection about humility that I experience. So I'm gonna close this talk with maybe like a message to everyone here and everyone virtually there. So here's what I can say. Be gutsy, stay humble, and always think of ways to make your legacy irreversible. Thank you so much.